Good morning, Dr. Dave. How you doing, my man?
Good morning, Dr. Joe. I didn't see you there. How are you doing, sir?
We got
Doing
to
most
stop
excellent.
meeting like this. I seem to be interrupting you. You got other things going on, so maybe we ought to,
Those awkward
reschedule our
moments.
time or
I don't
something.
know. Awkward moments are always finding a way into our conversation.
All right, so enough of that nonsense. We'll get started here. So we want to welcome you all back to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, where me and Dave just have our typical discussions about things we hope that you want to hear about and see. So with that, in our traditional fashion, I introduce and then we're going to put Dave on the hot seat and have him jump into our topic, which
Right on.
is being true to yourself,
Mm.
right? So, what does that mean to you, Dave?
Uh, Joe, that means to me, being true to yourself, like many of our topics, there's a personal and professional side to things. And
Right,
when we think about that, it's really about being honest with yourself, true to yourself. It involves that critical self-reflection that we've talked so many times about.
right,
It involves perspective and motivation, and not that we're going to rehash all those things, but it's again another one of those topics that just doesn't stand up by itself. There's a little bit more to it than just saying, "Oh, that's a car." There's many
right,
types
right.
of cars. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, to me, when we start talking about being true to yourself, it's absolutely being honest and sometimes brutally honest with
right.
yourself.
Yeah,
And that can be positive or it can be negative or challenging. It just depends. It can be for something good or it can be something that you're faced with that's a challenge that you're trying to overcome. So if we talk about the personal side of being true to yourself, we can get into relationships again, which crosses over
right,
and into the
right,
professional side. And your relationship with yourself. Are you really being honest? Or are you just overinflating, almost to the point of over exaggeration instead of just slightly embellishing, you know, how you feel about yourself. If you're playing a game of whatever and you think you're better than what you are and you're getting frustrated, maybe that's a time to be honest with yourself to say, hey, I'm not the best at this, and what can I do to become better? Instead of
right,
getting upset and frustrated with yourself. Or
right,
conversely, if it's something positive, don't beat yourself up. There's plenty of people that are willing to do that for you, and sometimes for free.
right, right, right,
So, you know, don't be hard on yourself. If you're doing a great job, pat yourself on the back, and you reward yourself for that sort of thing, because sometimes we're not always acknowledged or rewarded for the good things that we do. So again,
right.
being true to yourself. That's how I'm going to start this off, Joe. And so
Okay.
I'm gonna pitch this ball back over to you. Not that I know anything about sports aside from, well, I do like to play football to get it through the hoop, right? So, and
Yes, we
hit
got to
that
work
golf
on
ball
that.
with the bat. That's
Yeah,
that's what I know about sports.
we're gonna have to work on the sports and any of those analogies you throw out there about sports. So people disregard those.
Yeah.
No, but I think really in terms of when we think about being true to yourself, this will always come back to me. So my mom passed away a few years ago, uh, and in the final stages or years of her life, she had dementia, and so
Mm,
it was shortly after I earned my doctorate degree, and she was at my promotion when I was promoted to chief. So she saw at the end some really great achievements for me, and what was really nice about that was the fact that she had memory loss, but those are some of the highlights that she remembered. So every time I
oh,
went to
nice.
visit her, she was just smiling to ear, from ear to ear because she remembered those highlights. So
Nice.
it was really nice to hear, that she would continue to talk about those things over and over again. But
Hmm.
one of the things that will stick with me is the fact that we did have these conversations and she talked about me writing a book and all these things that was ahead of me, and the one thing she would always remind me or caution me was to be true to myself, and
Hmm.
that will just always stick with me because like I said, she remembered with their limited memory those highlights, but at the same time, she also, just wanted me to remember that, where I came from, who I
Mm,
was, and to always remain that person. And
yeah.
so, even to this day, in recent probably in the last 6 months, it's changed just slightly, but that's why I've always just called myself the average Joe, because I really wanted people to know that I'm still that shy kid, that kid that
Mhm.
struggled in school. I'm still that guy that loved basketball and wanted to be Dr. J. I'm still that person. So I still remain true to myself, but it's sometimes, and I was having this conversation with my brother yesterday, but sometimes at a detriment to yourself,
Mhm.
because I have achieved great things, and I am a different person than what I was, or that I continue to proclaim to be. So, that is a lesson I still need to learn about being true to myself. But like you say, um, to everything, the honesty behind it.
Mhm.
When I introduce myself, I should be introducing myself as Dr. Hamlet, because I've, you know, paid the price. I've done those things to get me to this level, and I should
Mhm.
really
Yep,
be proud
absolutely.
of that. And not to, and this is the way I always felt about it, that, I'm just going to come in, kick the door down and say, hey, look at me, I'm Dr. Hamlet. And so that's always the visual that I put in place when I think about, introducing myself, or, meeting new people and things like that. So that is kind of hindered me. And, but it's, again, at the same by the same token, it's, not, I'm no longer that average Joe. And
Right.
I really should own up to that, as being the case. So that was kind of where I wanted to start with this. But like you said, this also transfers and is intertwining with the professional side as well. I mean, because we definitely a reflection of ourselves personally and professional. So same thing applies
Yeah, you
on the
said something
professional level.
you said something, Joe, that's really, I think, an important thing that I think we should pull that thread or that string on a little bit. And that is not forgetting where you came from, that
Right,
humility and humbleness. And I'm not saying to the point of to not to the point of detriment, but
right,
just to keep you grounded so you
right,
don't get too full of yourself or too hard on yourself. And that's and to Joe's point, growing up and struggling in school, and you know that's where Joe and I, again, if you haven't listened to some of the backstory, Joe and I could almost be twinsies, aside from the fact that Joe's a couple of years older than me, maybe purportedly. So yeah, I think that's important because sometimes people lose themselves with this
right,
greatness or with this improvement. And it's not, what I'm not saying is remember it to bring yourself back down. I'm saying remember it because you've accomplished so much, and remember it, but not to the point of it going to your head either. So don't let it
right,
bring you down, and don't let it, you think that you're the best thing since apple pie, whether you are or not. Keep yourself humble and grounded, because people will respect that more than if you come in and, to your point, blowing down the doors and just telling everyone what to do. And I get where you're going with that, because you and I are not we didn't grow up the 4.0 students through our lives. We
right,
didn't
right,
grow up with that silver spoon and, living in the upper echelon in the elitist class. We worked and struggled and clawed and grabbed and climbed our way to the top. And I think one of our greatest assets is that we are true to ourselves, and we do
right,
remain humble, and we have humility, and that keeps us grounded in a positive way. It allows us to not overlook other people and to
right,
not
right.
overlook ourselves, because we've been there and we've done that, and we don't want to put other people through those hard, tough lessons that we've had to go through. We want them to understand them, but not necessarily have to live through all those very challenging times, and
Right, and that's why I said it was that will always stick with me, because even toward the end, when, for my mom, she was still providing wisdom to me. And that was along the line of what she meant was, you have achieved some great things,
Mhm.
but don't remember where you don't forget where you came
Right.
from.
And don't lose sight of your values
Don't
and ethics and
exactly
morals and
all those
beliefs.
things. and,
Yeah.
and so like I say, for her it was like she said it the first time, but for me she kept saying it, and like with most, most people, it takes a lot of time to sink in, and that was never my intention anyway, to go
Right, right.
now try to be this other person.
Sure.
But she really did help, and I knew that, but like I said, it
Mhm.
just was really still nice to hear that even at that stage where she was, that was still really important to her. So
Mhm.
I honored her, and I hope I continue to honor her because of that. But like you said, it keeps you grounded. It really
Yeah.
does. But like I say, we got to learn to not, keep us
Let it
to a
be a weight.
detriment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to not
to
let it be a weight to you. Let it be
right,
that, be grounded and be proud of that grounding, because
right.
that's going to help you remember where you came from and why you're doing the things that you're doing.
Absolutely. And it, for me, it gets me to that point of I need to continue to do what we do.
Mhm.
Because again, we're having a conversation yesterday with my brother. That's kind of one of the things we talked about, being an example, inspiring other people. And that's really what it's all about. Because
Yeah,
like you said,
absolutely.
we didn't grow up with all these things, the education, the family environment in some cases, but
Mhm.
to help people understand that they can overcome those things,
Yes.
you can do that. So enough about that side of it. But like you
Right.
said, for the professional side, me and you had this slight conversation offline before we started, but just some of the things, uh, you know, accepting jobs
Mhm.
that are really not the job that you want.
Yeah.
How long will it take if you accept a job that you weren't really excited about, and how long will it take for you to get, become unhappy and start
Yeah.
searching for another job?
And
And
I want to pull on that one a little bit. I
yep,
want us to run on that tangent a little bit, because that's an important one. Some of you may know, and I'm not sure if I brought it up or not, but one of the things that Joe and I do is, we and we've done it for many years. We talk to military and veterans and the general public,
right,
either one-on-one or in groups, about um, career development and professional development. And within those areas, we do share our stories. It's not to talk about us, but it's to share that experiential learning with others. And now I'm going to share a couple of my stories. One is when I got out of the military the first time, I realized that I wanted to go back in, but there were some challenges with that in the time. There
right,
was some administrations in place that made things challenging. So I took a job in a position that I wasn't 100% comfortable with, but I thought it'd be a stepping stone to more of my law enforcement career. And that stepping stone lasted 5.5 years, and it was not a pleasant experience on many different
right,
levels. I did grow through it. I did learn a lot through it, a lot of life lessons and a lot of professional lessons. Fast forward, the last time I got out of the military, because I've been in 3 times, as some of the folks can recall, um, I had a job lined up. I was offered and accepted a position coming out of the military. I would have taken a nice step up, not a huge one, but a nice step up. And it was in a training as a trainer for a defense contractor. And I would have been, and I was super happy and excited about it. I was called the Friday before I was supposed to start, and they had to rescind the offer because they had been bought out by another defense contractor. And that's when I panicked, and I did it again. I took a job that I wasn't necessarily wanting, but it was a job. Now, bear in mind, I had time. I didn't have to do that. But because I wasn't true to myself and I didn't stay true to myself, and I panicked and I allowed that panic to take over, I took that position. And it was a huge step down in pay and responsibility and my perceived value of myself. And it took me several years to get out of that rut. So it is important to be true to yourself professionally, understanding what your true value is, and not diminishing it or accepting something lower just because one or two other people say that's what you are, doesn't mean you are that thing.
right.
So be true to yourself and be honest. And if you're better than something, if you do not want to, and I'm not trying to diminish any other careers, if you don't want to do manual labor, then don't do manual labor.
Right. Right.
If you don't want to work in the office, don't work in the office. If you want to work for a certain amount and you're qualified at that level, don't settle. you know
Right.
have that
Well,
faith and be true to yourself, and follow through with your beliefs.
well, you talk about, having that tough decision to make, and sometimes you think that's the only option you have. So to maybe help you with that positioning, or figuring out what's next for you, that's when we have to really consider again that self-reflection.
Hmm.
The goals that you set for yourself, is it still in alignment with what you want to do? And to Dave's point, if you have identified a lot of those things, if you've done a self-reflection, kind of have a idea of where you want to go in the future, then maybe you will consider that more than,
Hmm.
again, like, get into a panic mode and say, well, I have to take this because I don't know what's next or what's coming
Right.
for me. So I think you put yourself in a better position, again, if you've done the self-reflection, if you
Right.
have an idea of where you're trying to go. And I think that's why we keep talking about it over in multiple episodes. It's just because it really comes down to you controlling where you go, and you
Yep.
do that by identifying where you are today and where you want to go. And so
Yep.
because I was just thinking when Dave was saying that, a lot of us get put in that situation when we have to pay bills and have to do those things immediately. But maybe if we had a plan, or we had
Or a
goals that we were
backup
trying to
plan,
achieve,
or a
or
couple of
back,
backup plans.
right. And that's really what it comes down to. Not getting blindsided,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases. And that's why I always throw out there, when you're having a conversation with somebody, and you're trying to help them see the light, beyond the tunnel or inside the tunnel, and all they see is what's there in front of them. But you help them try and visualize what could happen if tomorrow you
Hmm.
don't have that job anymore, or something happens to them. Are they in a position to move forward? Are they in a
Yeah.
position to use that plan B or plan C? But so I think that's, if any, if you're listening or watching this, if there's one thing that you want to take away, again, it's just that, identifying where you're trying to go.
Absolutely.
That really will help you. Again, you may have to sidetrack, like Dave said, he sidetracked for several years, but as long as you keep that in your sights, that goal, that end state
Hmm.
that you want to be, I think it, like in this case, he realized, hey, this is not the right thing, but he kept trying
I
and kept
kept
pushing
going. Yeah.
forward. And
And I'm glad you bring that up, because
yeah,
my end goal was to get my education, to get
right,
my college degree, and then when I was going through my bachelor's, to get my master's. And that's what was driving me after that derailment, if you will. And
right,
after that, I learned that you really have to stay focused and committed to yourself and true to yourself. Is this a goal that I can still achieve under the circumstances? Do I need to maybe make some adjustments to that goal, or the adjustments to the process of attaining that goal? you
right,
know are there steps that I can skip? Are there steps that are absolutely required?
right,
Have I put too much in or not enough,
right,
to make sure that those things happen or don't happen? So yeah, when we talk about being true to yourself, it's not an easy discussion. It's, again,
no,
another
not
one of
at
those
all.
complex topics that you and I talk about, and we dig into a little bit, and we dig deep sometimes, because there are so many layers to these topics and discussions. And superficially, it sounds like, oh yeah, we do this all the time, and we do, and it sounds easy until you start digging into it. And then when you do dig into it, you sometimes you're surprised at what you find. And maybe
Right,
you're not happy with what you find, and maybe you're very happy with what you find. But there again, that true to yourself is the important piece, because if you're honest with yourself and true to yourself and with yourself, you'll be able to have those conversations
right, yeah,
inside your head, and be able to work through these things. And
right,
again, that's what your support network is there for too. They're to bounce their sounding boards. They're there to bounce ideas off of you. I can't tell you how many times, I would beat myself up when I was in school about an assignment, and my wife or my parents or my family or my friends or my support system would be like, Dave, it's one paper. It's one grade. It's not going to make or break you. You know, who cares if you get a 4.0 or not? If you want to, that's great. If not,
Right.
it's not going to stop you from having the life that you want, you know? So be careful, and to that effect, be careful what you commit to. You know, I wanted to get a 4.0, and when I got my first A minus, that took it out the door. It's okay.
Right. Right.
Learn from it, accept it, and press forward, because you can't change it. So, um, you know, don't dwell upon things that you can't change or fix anymore. You know, you can't change the past. I can't fix that assignment. I can't fix those GPAs. It's okay. Still a doctor.
Right. Right.
Still achieve my goal.
Right.
Still, you know, and so, you know, the same with everyone that's listening or watching. Y'all can do this stuff. This isn't,
Right.
well, I'm not going to say it's not rocket science. Sometimes it is rocket science, but you know, it, just don't overthink things and just be honest with yourself. You'd be surprised what you'll learn about yourself when you're honest and true to yourself, when you sit down and take time. You know, I'm not saying, you know, we're not saying you have to do this every day for 6 hours, but you know, I would recommend at least once a week or a couple times a month, spend some time with yourself, you know, whether you're driving, whether you just want to go out and sit in the backyard, but spend some time with yourself and just think and reflect about what you've done, what you're doing, where you're going, and if your path is still lining up the way it should.
No, I think that is a very good recommendation and an exercise that should occur more than, like you say, once a year. You revisit your
Right.
goals or find out if
Yeah.
you're still on that path. You're right. It is.
And it
It's
doesn't have
that
to be hours on
continuous.
end that you do
No,
this.
it's like you say. Sometimes
You're
those
doing a
thoughts go
check-in, you're
through
doing a
your head.
self-check.
Yeah, that you know want to make sure that you're still aligned, that things are
Yeah.
still on the path that you planned. And like you say, the part of that that's most important is being true and honest to yourself. Being, again, like kind of like you, I was trying to get that 4.0, and I got an A minus too, and I was like, oh man, so we'll get there.
Yeah.
But you're right. I could have continued to dwell on it.
But you're
Could
still doctor.
yeah, and that's kind of yeah. I didn't end up with a 4.0, but again, that was one of those goals that I had for myself as well.
Mhm.
But like you say, when we think about these things, we really have to think about those things that we can control.
Yeah.
Because once I got the A minus, that was out of my control. So
Yeah.
it was really no reason for me to dwell on that. But still did some self-reflection on how I can improve, what I could do. So that's just human nature that we're going to do that. But
Yeah.
I think that exercise you talk about with the that self-reflection, even if it's like you say, just on the way to work or
Yeah.
sitting in the backyard looking up at the stars, whatever your mode you choose to, kind of evaluate where
Mhm.
you are. I think that should happen all the time, almost like, continuous learning.
Yeah.
It's and even it doesn't mean that you have to take classes every year and all
Mhm.
that. It is just that you're taking in something that you didn't know before, and
Right.
then using that to evaluate your current situation and how it's going to help you for the future. So that's really what you're doing when you take stock of who you are and where you are. It's the same thing. It's,
Yeah.
am I still aligned? Are things still going the way I planned? Do I need to change anything? Yeah,
And
and
we do this on a regular basis with our friends and the people that are important to us. We
right,
check in with them. We see how they're doing. If they're having a good day or a bad day, you know, what kind of advice can we offer to help them stay aligned and not get too far down or too full of themselves?
right, right,
And if we're willing to do that for our friends and family and loved ones and our support network, we should be definitely doing that with ourselves, because
right,
we need to be our own best friend first. If we can't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of other people, right?
right.
And if we're willing to do a temperature check with them, then we need to be willing to do the same thing with ourselves. Have that conversation with ourselves, see how we're doing, check in on yourself and make sure you're still good to go.
You,
And
you know,
again, to your point with lifelong learning, this is part of the learning process. Learning doesn't
right,
stop. One of the things we were told in our doctoral program by our professors, both of us, was that, you know, we're all like, yeah, we can't wait to get our doctorate degree. Woohoo, we've done it. We've completed
right,
everything. And they're like, you've completed this. It's not the end. It's just the beginning. And there are many
right,
songs out there that says, you know, when one thing ends, another thing begins, and that's true. That's absolutely true to life. Just because you get through one thing doesn't mean that's the end. There's always something to do, even if it's just sitting there and taking a pause and taking it all
Right,
in.
right. Yeah, that should all be factored into, the next step, the next thing that you're going to, go after.
Mhm.
Because if you don't take that time to, kind of reevaluate, see now
Yeah.
where you're going to go
Look
with
at what you
this.
learned. Look at the
Right,
lessons. Look at the great things that you learned, and look at some of the challenging things that you overcame that you
right,
may not want to have to revisit again.
right. And now how am I going to apply that to my future?
Yeah.
I mean,
It'll only make you stronger and
right.
wiser.
It's that, again, that evaluation piece. Where are you today and where do you want to go? I think
Hmm.
that should always be in people's mind. And I said this before on a previous show. It's not that you're always trying to get to that next thing, or just bypassing where you are today or not living in the moment. But said it's something to be said, to be prepared for the
Right.
next thing. And
Right.
so I would just, again, encourage people to think about that. Not that you're always trying to move
Yeah.
away from
That
where you
that
are,
next
but
thing may not be a huge or
right,
monumentous thing. It may just be for some folks just getting up the next day,
right. Yep. And
putting
we've
on your
talked about
pants
that.
and
Yep.
going to work and just pressing forward. Sometimes that's what the next step is
Right.
literally the next physical step that you're going to take.
Right.
And that's okay. Just keep doing it. Keep pressing forward. You all can do this. Joe and I are examples. We're not here to
Right.
brag about anything. We're
Absolutely.
not that kind of a proud person. We're proud of what we've done and accomplished. We're proud that we help people, but we are not considered arrogant. You can do this. If Joe and I
Right.
can, with the backgrounds and the upbringings that we had, can get this far, so can you. And that's what we want. That's the takeaway from all these conversations that we have, is that you
Absolutely.
can do it.
And we talk about that. We just talked about this. That evaluation, that is a constant for me,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it is for Dave.
Yep.
Every time we have a conversation, we're thinking about, hey, how can we improve this? How can we do that? And that doesn't happen just by you, going through the motions, by you
Mhm.
just living day to day. It's,
Yeah.
again, about being deliberate, about thinking about the future, about what's next, about how we can improve, how can we be better. That's really what, our conversations are about most of the time.
Mhm.
We do have,
And
where we're just kind of mess around, but a lot of our conversations are
wait, we
about.
mess around? When are we messing around? What? This is news to me. I want to mess
Thought it was
around.
always serious. But yeah, just jokes aside, but that really is, what we are always talking about, how we can improve, how we can move forward, how we can do better.
Yeah. And
And
sometimes doing better is just getting by, folks. So, again, don't be hard on yourself. Be true and honest. But to Joe's point, keep pressing forward. Go ahead.
well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. It's we always think of those huge wins and things that are obvious, but like they said, sometimes in some cases, it's just getting up that next day and taking that first step, putting on your
Yeah.
pants, and that's what, even my brother, we were having that conversation yesterday. That's really what it's about. You may not be where you want to be today or
Right.
tomorrow, but the idea or the fact is that you just keep pushing forward, you keep moving, and you'll realize, if you really take stock of it, look back, where you were 6 months ago, and
Yeah.
you'll realize you've made tremendous strides and huge
Yeah.
progress. And so even me, I get down sometimes thinking, I should be a lot further than where I am. But then I do that reflection and think, oh man, just last year, none of this was happening. In our case, this podcast, we're
Hmm.
coming up close to a year now, and that's
I
really
know.
hard to believe,
It's right around the
because
corner.
yeah, but at the beginning, we were procrastinating so long that we probably would be on year 2 or 3
It-
by now
or
if we
or
really
or
would have.
6 or 8 or 10 if we would have just started recording all the
Exactly.
conversations we've had.
Yeah, so even today now, even it took us a while to get started, but now, like I say, we're coming up on a year, and I'm just still like, wow, we're at this point. So that's why, again, I would just have people really uh, think about
Mhm.
that their progress, and really take a look at it. But that comes with that reflection, and just continuous self-evaluation and reflection of where you are and where you'd like to go. So be true to yourself. That's, like I say, I'll always remember that. Just because at the end for my mom, that was those words that she spoke. They really hit home for me, which I don't think I had an issue with it, but it's just for her to continue to, reiterate that was
Right.
just really important to me. So with that, Dave, I'll just have you summarize your thoughts on,
I think we've had a pretty good conversation today. I would like just to put back out there that, again, be true to yourself. Do not compromise your values, your morals, your ethics, and your beliefs, and just keep pressing forward. And that pressing forward doesn't have to be a high energy, high
yeah.
octane, fast paced thing. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll do it. It may take a little bit longer than you anticipated, but you will definitely get there.
Well, thanks for that, Dave. And I just want to touch back on what I started with, and it is make sure you're being true to yourself, but remember, it doesn't have to come at a detriment. It
Right.
doesn't have to diminish who
Mhm.
you are now today. I mean, yeah, Dave said it. We want to remember those things, so we remain humble, remain grounded. Those are
Mhm.
important things, but at the same time, we should also celebrate and appreciate where we are today.
Even the little
So,
stuff. Yeah.
absolutely. So, again, we want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. And as always, you continue being your not so ordinary you.